So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on this session. We really appreciate your time and attendance today. We'll make sure that we make these next 30 minutes worth your while, and also for the folks who might be looking at this session in recorded format later on, which will be uploaded on the HashiCorp website. So we're going to start off today with our session. Our session is called Getting in the Zone with Terraform on Azure, and or rather, Getting in the Landing Zone with Terraform on Azure. Now, for those of you who might have noticed, one of the bathroom toiletries in Marriott Hotel does say in the zone body lotion, so we didn't get inspired from there. So we were a bit more genuine, and we did put in a bit more effort, and we basically asked ChatGPT to give us the session title and description. So yeah, so that's how we got the session title and description. Now, helping us forward towards introductions, before I introduce myself and my colleague here, I just wanted to call out, in true Microsoft fashion, all our colleagues and friends who have worked, and our community in general, actually, who have worked on a lot of the stuff that we're going to be presenting here today. So big shout out to them and a big thank you to them. Not just as Microsoft, as I mentioned, there are customers, and then there's a wider community that's been helping us with that. So first of all, introducing myself, my name is Bilal Amjad, and I am a cloud solution architect. One of my passions is to cover Azure Landing Zones and implementing them with the Terraform on Azure. And I work as part of the customer architecture and engineering team at Microsoft, which Matt is going to explain a bit more.
Thanks, Bilal. So my name is Matt White. I am the Terraform lead for Azure Landing Zones, amongst other things. And yeah, we work in customer architecture and engineering. And what do? We go really deep into customer engagements and help unblock things and help people succeed on Azure. But we also are tasked with having impact at scale, a global scale. So how do we do that? Well, we write stuff to make your lives easier, right? So Terraform modules, bicep modules, things like that, right? We're going to talk to you a little bit about some of what we do today. So what are you going to learn? We're going to cover a little bit about some of the stuff we make, some of the providers and some of the modules, how you then put that together to achieve something meaningful. And then we're going to take it up a level. And harking back to the keynote this morning where they were saying, well, what's your time to first commit as a kind of KPI, right? We're going to put that all together and show you how you can deliver ready-to-code kind of development environments for your developers in about 4 minutes if the demo works. So let's get started. The journey we want to take you on starts at the platform level. And unsurprisingly, being from the Azure Landing Zones team, we think you should start with Azure Landing Zones. We created that reference architecture about 3 years ago, I think. And it was in a response to customers asking us, hey, how do we do landing? How do we get started on Azure? And we used to say, well, it depends. That didn't go down well. So what we thought we'd do is create a reference architecture that people could use as a North Star. Bilal's going to talk to you about that in a minute. Subscription vending is the next step. And you might be thinking, well, why do I need to bother? Why do I need to create subscriptions or automate that? So the subscription forms a natural security boundary for your workloads or tightly coupled workloads. So it makes sense to have more smaller subscriptions than fewer larger ones. It also forms a governance boundary. Because we, in ALZ, we do policy at the management group level, it makes sense to put subscriptions in management groups and have that as your governance. So if you have loads of different workloads in a subscription, they all kind of got to share the same governance. And so it makes sense to have fewer workloads in a subscription. So yeah, moving on. What we have called secure and compliant app teams at scale is that kind of how do you give an environment to your development teams that is actually useful and actually they don't have to faff about configuring stuff. Finally, best practice module library. So how do you get your teams to deploy resources in a secure by default fashion, highly available by default? We'll talk to you about that in a minute.
Yeah. So now, Matt talked about this journey that we've been going along with customers. And I think any journey, if Microsoft says, hey, do that, that doesn't work out. We really need to see that that journey works out with our customers. And customers, small, medium, large, of all sizes, and all types of requirements and environments that they want to set up, right? One of the journeys that we've been on, one of the customers is Unilever. I think it's a household organization that we're all familiar with, operates at a global scale. So similarly, their Azure requirements are also operating at a global scale. We've been on this journey with them, and I think from the feedback that you can see here, on this journey, they've been able to set up end-to-end development environments, which has basically helped them set up GitHub repositories, Terraform workspaces, and Azure resources end-to-end. Now, with that, I think, so strategically speaking, we talked about the journey. But you might be thinking, OK, show me the real stuff. Where's the stuff that makes it happen, right? So going on to the stuff we make that tactically makes this strategic journey happen, starting first off with Azure Landing Zones. So Azure Landing Zones is our prescribed way of enabling any Azure environment at scale. It's basically our go-to reference architecture, or what we like to call as our North Star reference architecture. A few of the focuses in this architecture are driving your governance through policy, having your subscriptions democratized as the unit of scale in your Azure environment. And then it's available not just in Terraform, but bicep and ClickOps also. And as on this slide and on further slides that will come down the road, the short link and the QR code is there for you to be able to get more details on it.
Thanks, Bilal. So I mentioned that we write Terraform modules, and one of the ones that we write is this one. It is a representation of ALZ reference architecture in Terraform, and it's really easy to get started. So in about 10 lines of HCL, you can deploy the reference architecture, which comprises of like 250 odd resources. But it's also really easy to customize. We recognize that ALZ reference architecture is just a reference architecture. People are going to want to customize it and tailor it to their needs. So we can do that. We can change the management group hierarchy. We can change the policies that we deploy with that. As well, we can deploy core networking resources. So we've got connectivity and management. So hub and spoke or vWAN, as well as centralized logging. So in ALZ, we prescribe a centralized logging solution with log analytics. That all gets deployed in one go with this module, so it's super easy. Next, subscription vending. So creating a subscription should not be an onerous task, right? But actually, the subscription on its own is kind of the easy bit. This, in a single module call, what we've done is wrapped up some of the common things that you need to do in order to kind of do the plumbing for that subscription and make it work. So we can create a subscription. You don't have to, though. You can use it with an existing one if you want, which makes testing easier. You can create one or more virtual networks, or none or more virtual networks. You can pair them together. So if you've got architectures that require presence in perhaps different regions, you can create those VNets and pair them all together. You can also then pair those VNets back to a hub or a vWAN hub. A subscription's no good if nobody can access it, right? So you can grant role assignments into that subscription. And we're going to major on federated identity a lot today, which is a really cool way of providing access from cloud-based CI/CD runners like GitHub Actions or Terraform Cloud into your subscription without relying on shared secrets. So we use the magic of OpenID Connect to do that, and it's really cool. It's really easy. Subvending wouldn't be possible today in its current form without this provider. I hope some of you were able to catch Stephen's session, which was 15 minutes before this in the hallway track, where he talked about AzAPI. So we think this is cool in our team because it allows us to deploy resources at any scope in a single apply. If you are familiar with Azure RM, you'll know that you need to give it the subscription ID when you run Terraform init. The problem is we don't know what that is because we haven't created it yet. So AzAPI allows us to string this together in a single apply, whereas if you're doing this in Azure RM, you'd need to apply the subscription first, take the output of that, and then apply the stuff. Now, obviously, we didn't have stacks. They've just announced that, so maybe we don't need to use it. But actually, this is a really cool provider for other reasons as well. Zero-day support for any Azure resource. It's a fully managed Terraform resource as well. It's not some hacky way of like embedding an ARM template or, lo and behold, a AZCLI local exec provisioner, not that I've ever done that, into something. It's a fully managed Terraform resource. You can create, update, and delete it. It's got great language server support and VS Code as well, so do check it out. It's really, really useful. Just as an example, here's some example resource. So you can see the type. It's got a resource provider. It's got a resource type, but it's got an API version. Now, that can be whatever you want as long as it's supported. Great if you're on some private secret squirrel private preview program and you need to have a private API. But the parent ID is what really helps us. So we can specify any scope. That can be like tenant root, management group, subscription, resource group, resource, whatever, right? So we can deploy resources anywhere. Super easy. Bilal.
All right. So we talked about the journey, and we talked about the stuff that makes that journey possible, right? Azure Landing Zone, Terraform module. Following up on that, the Azure Landing Zone subscription vending module. Now, the last mile of that journey is something that our community and our customers have been looking for us to support them with, is that, OK, I've got a set of resources to deploy at the platform level or at the application level. I can write the code myself for Terraform, but I would want to see Microsoft give us some guidance on code in modular form on how do we deploy certain resources. So say, for example, Key Vault. How does Microsoft prescribe you deploying that Key Vault in your environment, right? So that's been something which the community has been asking us for. And we're happy to announce on this conference that we're coming up with that capability with something called Azure Verified Modules that will be available not just in Terraform, but Bicep. And we're looking to have parity between the two. So whether you're doing Terraform or you're doing Bicep, you'll have parity between the two. And it's for those of you who might have been familiar with earlier iterations of this that we've had, Terraform verified modules, or for Bicep we have Carmel. It's an amalgamation of both. We're bringing them both into a single framework called Azure Verified Modules. What does this basically provide you? So this basically provides you specification for quality, tested and maintained modules for Azure by Microsoft. So this is something which we hope that you would be, that helps you part of that last mile on the journey that we've been talking about. And again, the short link and the QR code is there. So please do check out more for details. And obviously, your feedback is what helps us drive this forward. Now, so I think we talked good enough, but let's see all of this in action, right? So if we want to put all of this together, what we're going to do is that we're going to go into a demo, and we're going to leverage something called the Azure Landing Zone Accelerator. Now, what this does is that it gets you going with a Q&A style approach where it's going to ask you some questions. You're going to provide your inputs, and based on that, it's going to bootstrap an Azure environment for you using the Azure Landing Zone Terraform module that we just looked at. Set up a GitHub repo, set up the actions, set up CI/CD to it, and off you go. It's going to give you some common architecture patterns which you can choose from. And then it's aimed at beginners, but for our more mature organizations and our more mature community that are looking to get set up very quickly, you would be able to leverage that also. So with that, let me head us into our first demo for the day. So we're going to kick off here. And we're going to, first of all, we're in Azure Portal. We're going to check the subscriptions that we have. So we've got 3 subscriptions: management, connectivity, and identity. And within these 3 subscriptions, we're going to leverage the management subscription particularly. Going into Cloud Shell, checking our account, what context it's set into for the subscription. It's pointing to management subscription. That looks good. So now heading over into PowerShell to run a command. The command basically literally says new ALZ environment. You're going to provide your choice of CI/CD, which is, in this case, is going to be GitHub. You're going to provide your choice of IAC, which in this case is going to be Terraform. And then from there on, you're going to provide your details in the form of Q&A style.
Hey, Bilal, did you just put my GitHub token on?
No, we've deleted that, yeah.
Oh, okay. Sure.
So we've deleted that. And so you can see it's asking you questions. It's asking you questions around your repo, your architecture, your subscriptions, your networking details. And as you kind of continue to provide that, you can see that it then initializes based on that, gives you a Terraform plan on what it's going to do. You're going to say yes and apply. And from there on, it goes ahead and provisions and bootstraps that environment that we just talked about. And there you go. So this is obviously sped up, so but it should be fairly quick.
It's not that quick, though. We did.
Yeah. So now back into Azure portal. So we've got two resource groups. The first one shows you, first one contains the managed identity that Matt was talking about earlier. That's the managed identity, which is leveraging those federated credentials for the Terraform apply and plan for our CI/CD. The second resource group contains our storage account. That storage account has a container that's being used to host and securely manage our Terraform state file over there. And then if you go into access control, you can see the same managed identity having access of management group contributor through inheriting it through the management group. And then if you kind of scroll down, you will see the same identity having a storage blob data owner with it also. So those two roles are assigned for it to basically operate.
That's really fantastic. So actually, those two role assignments mean that we can deploy the ALZ reference architecture, because we've got, and also have secure access to the state file without you having to do anything.
Yeah,
fantastic.
Absolutely. So we looked at the portal. Now let's head over into the repo. So in GitHub, in our organization, in our repo, we can basically see the team that has been set up to approve the Terraform applies. We can see the repository itself with the code, actually. So you can see the code that's bootstrapped for us based on our inputs. So it's using the ALZ Terraform module that we just talked about. And you can see it's set up the code all for you, and it's using the modules for hub networking and gateway, as we specified during our Q&A on what we wanted to deploy. And then from there, it goes into, we'll have a look at one of the other files, which is going to be the Terraform TFRs file. You can see all those inputs were the inputs which we provided during our Q&A that it was running through. It set up the CI/CD for us. If you go there, go into workflows, and run the continuous integration workflow, that's basically going to do a Terraform validation for us. It's going to, you can obviously, if you need to, update the code before you run through this outside of the Q&A that you did earlier. So it validates the Terraform, and then it runs a Terraform plan. And while it's going to run through that, it's going to tell us about what it's going to apply into Azure.
Yep. And there are no shared secrets here, because we're using that federated identity.
Yep.
It kind of
no
just
shared
works.
Secrets, yep.
Really easy.
Yep. And this works with not just GitHub. This works with Azure DevOps. And we have it in the pipeline for it to work with
Terraform Cloud.
Terraform Cloud. Yep.
So, yep.
Yep. And there you go. So that's, you can see at the end of that plan, it's going to create those 258 resources based on the requirements that we provided it, and then have your Azure environment up and running with the GitHub repo, set up with the code, with the CI/CD, with you just having to run through a simple Q&A. Yep.
Fantastic.
So, yep.
Cool, thank you. So we talked about subscription vending not being about just a subscription. It's about reducing that time to first commit. So keep going back to that keynote earlier. How do we give them, these development teams, an environment which is useful? So we've done the platform stuff. That's really great. We set that up. The process, from a kind of reference architecture point of view, is on top there, right? You need to collect some data. You need to run some pipelines. You need to provision some resources, right? But we need to do lots and lots of things in here. So this is the demo we've got for you today. The code, again, is available publicly. You can have a look at that Git repo. just to say we are not reinventing kind of request management here. We are simulating that with a API call to a GitHub action. We didn't know about Waypoint, otherwise we would have done it on Waypoint, but maybe next year we'll improve this. But yeah, so we're going to run an API call. We're going to kick off a GitHub action. That's going to bootstrap a workspace in Terraform Cloud, and it's going to upload some code to it and configure it. It's also then going to run an apply, which is going to create our subscription, resource groups, identities, networking if you want. But we're also using the GitHub provider as well to create a Git repo from a supplied template. It's going to configure that, and we're also going to create a user workspace for the devs teams to use, right? So that's the context under which their Terraform will apply. So if we can switch over now to the live demo. Gulp. Right. So this is the Git repo we're going to use. It worked earlier. So we've got some modules here. We've got Terraform Cloud Workspace module, which configures the workspace for the development team. We've got the landing zone vending module, which we spoke about earlier. So several inputs to that, create subscriptions, user-managed identities. We've got some federated credentials, some resource groups, that sort of thing. And in this example, we are pre-provisioning the subscription with 2 resource groups. Now, I realize that that isn't actually that useful to developers, but just for time purposes, that's what we're doing. In a real-world scenario, you might provision an app service, an AKS environment, something like that, right?
For example, if I come and ask you, hey, through subscription vending, could you deploy a 3-tier web form for the application team?
Yeah, you just compose, as long as you can compose it in here, absolutely, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
totally possible.
So this kind of, once you've got your platform set up with Azure Landing Zones, subscription vending kind of helps you when an application team comes in and says, hey, we want our application to be deployed on Azure. The subscription vending not just helps you with vending the subscription, but also setting up that landing zone with that application infrastructure in there. Yep.
So you'll see that I've carefully changed my GitHub taken to change me in this example file, but this is the payload that we're sending to GitHub action. You can choose whatever schema you want. This is just the one we've chosen, right? So we're going to create some resource groups, set some owners, and this is really important as well. This is the template repository that we are going to clone, make a copy of. Okay, so let's do this. If we go trigger vend HashiCorp, right? That's basically sent that to GitHub Actions to start the process off. And now there's a random number in here, so we just got to find out what that is. It's 634. That's going to be important. We're going to need that later. So this is the GitHub repo that we've triggered the action in. And you can see that Vend subscription is running. All I want to see here is that the Terraform Cloud stuff is started. Cool, perfect. So
yeah, if I run into an issue earlier, but
yeah, it didn't work earlier. We had to tweak it anyway. You can see that it's created the management workspace now, so it's bootstrapped that, and that is now planning. Okay. So while that's doing that, I just want to take you back here, and I don't know how many of you were a child in 1980s Great Britain.
I was.
Just me? Okay, right. Well, we had this show. This is going to be a weird analogy. We had this show called Blue Peter, and on Blue Peter, they used to make and do things like egg boxes, paper mache, sticking stuff together, right? They also used to have loads of animals on stage, and the animals always used to misbehave, and they'd go to the toilet on stage frequently. It was quite amusing. So, but we didn't have the internet then, so we had to make and do stuff, right? So in the spirit of Blue Peter, what they'd do is they'd make half of a model, and then they'd go, oh, here's one we made earlier. So basically, that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to show you one that I made earlier while that's provisioning. If you're wondering, that's what Blue Peter looked like. That's what my childhood was like in the 80s. We have got a half-built snowman right now. We are going to show you a fully built snowman, and then hopefully we'll come back and see the one we've just created, okay? And yes, that was just a waste time while this still provision stuff. So this is the repo that, actually no, let's get to management groups first. So this is the management group where the subscription lives, HashiCorp demo, the original one that we prepared earlier. You can see in here, you can't see in here. There you go. You can see in here that we've got some resource groups which correspond to the resource groups in the request. Now, in reality, that might be an AKS cluster or something, right? You can see in the identity that we, again, have a federated identity, the new hotness, right, for granting access into subscriptions. But this time, the federated credentials are for Terraform Cloud, and the subject identifier is based on the workspace and stuff that we're using.
Yep.
Makes sense? So let's have a look at the template repository that we are using. So this is the HashiCorp demo template repo. It's been created from that template, and this is what we've contained. It's pretty unadventurous, but we wanted to show you that it's really easy to provision resources. So we've got a sample config here, and it's going to create a VNet, a VM, a network interface, and a VM with a terrible admin password that we probably shouldn't have put in there. But anyway, it's a demo. What we can do now is have a look at the GitHub actions that have been configured for us as well. And this is already present. All you have to do is click go and run that. And hopefully, we'll get to see that in a minute, because if we go back to our workspace, we can see the HashiCorp demo. And although it hasn't finished, I'm hoping it's created the subscription. So it's about 91 resources, right? So if I scroll down here, come on. It has created the subscription. You can see that. It's also created the management group association. Okay, so let's go back to our management groups. And whereas before we had one, now we have two.
Two.
Yes. So
it worked.
It worked. So we've got our new subscription, freshly created. Our new subscription ID. Again, we've got some resource groups here. If I look at resource group 1, it's empty at the moment. So what was the number? The number is 634. OK, so let's go to HashiCorp demo/634 and have a look at the repo it's just created for us. It's going to look familiar. It's from the same template.
Did you create that before, right?
I did not. No, I did not create 1,000 repos just to make sure it works.
Yeah.
I should have done. But yeah, so let's just YOLO it right now, because we've got three minutes left, and let's just run this, and we can see the supply running. So what that's going to do, it's going to kick off a really short validation, and then it's going to talk to Terraform Cloud and tell it to apply that configuration. Okay? It doesn't normally take that long, so it starts running, does some stuff. It's already doing the init. This is fantastic news. So if I go back to my workspaces in Terraform Cloud, you'll see that it has created a user one, right, in 634. Okay? Again, all of this authentication, we didn't have to worry about it. It's done for us. So your developers now, at this point, creating value for your organization. It's doing a plan. It's creating 4 resources. You've got the VMs there. It's going to work. Let's go back to the slides now and wrap this up. So we've shown you some of the stuff we make, some of the modules we make, some of the providers we make. If you didn't catch Stephen's session last time, please come and talk to us on the Azure booth about AzAPI, because it's really cool. Bilal showed us how we can put that together to really bootstrap your platform environment and get going. And in fact, one of the questions that customers ask us most is, cool, we like your modules and stuff, but how, give us an opinionated view on pipelines. And we're like, OK, cool, here you go.
So don't just tell it, it depends.
Like, yeah, don't say that. And then what we've done is we've shown you how to provision code-ready development environments for your developers so they can get going, get creating value really quickly. And with that, that is it. We really appreciate you listening. Please come and see us at the Azure booth. We'll be around for the rest of the day. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.